So, hello everyone, and welcome back to another round of interviews. Today, I have a really special guest for some of our current champions. You guys may be familiar with who Sasha is, but for alumni or any other viewers who are looking at this content, today's going to be a conversation between Sasha and I, where you guys are going to get to know Sasha a bit more, a bit about her background, career path, and what she currently does in terms of involvement with these champions now. So, before we jump into anything else regarding the conversation, I want to pass it over to Sasha for a bit of an introduction.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Sasha Struthers. I am one of the facilitators for one of the cohorts. My background is I'm an attorney. I work here in Los Angeles, and I deal a lot with landlord-tenant law.
Great. So again, for the current champions, I know you guys are familiar with who Sasha is. We just had our recent meet and greet event, which I know all the champions, or at least 170 of them, got to know Sasha. But to jump into the conversation and for alumni to get to know Sasha a bit more, I want to kick it off with one question, which I like to ask everyone is, what are some of the most transformative mindset shifts or beliefs that you personally encountered that have helped or have been crucial for your own growth, especially as an attorney? I know you dealt with those hard times studying for the bar and getting through that process. So you could tell us a little bit more about those mindset shifts.
So I had one mindset shift sort of when I was in law school and I was studying for the bar exam. So the California bar exam is one of the hardest bar exams in the country. It has an extremely high fail rate. I did not pass it the first time, but when I took it, it was 3 days, 18 hours. So 6 hours each day. Now it's 2 days, 6 hours each day. And one of the things that really helped me when I felt like a little bummed out that I didn't pass it the first time was that one, I knew a lot of people didn't pass it the first time. And two, I knew that the test could be passed. So one of the mind shifts that I had was that everything is learnable and everything is achievable, and that there's people who have already done it. So that goes to show how possible things are. Then another one I had, which was now being an attorney and practicing, is that not everything is a dumpster fire. So as an attorney, you have multiple clients and you hire an attorney because typically you have a problem. So I deal a lot with problems and I deal with everybody's problems. So you have maybe one vital problem when you're coming to me, but I deal with everyone. So I have everyone's vital problems. And I've learned so I can manage my own practice and also manage my own mental health is that not everything is a dumpster fire. And sometimes you go, okay, it's 6 o'clock. I am done today. I'm going to move this to tomorrow. So that's helped me kind of avoid and mitigate burnout.
And to follow up on the attorney element of yourself, can you tell us and the viewers a little bit about where that passion came from? Was it something in high school, maybe family, or where did that interest start?
That came from my dad. And when I was seeing my dad, we had this conversation about the movie Terminator. So there's intellectual property and it's the right for Terminator. And they were sold, and eventually the movie Terminator Salvation came out. And it was wildly more successful than people thought it was going to be. So the original owner of the Terminator rights who sold them felt like, oh man, I like sold these rights too cheap. I should get a cut of this. And so my dad was reading this article about it and he goes, hey, I think you would make for a really good attorney. I think you should become an attorney. And it was like very out of the blue. Like I had never thought about that. So I kind of like sat there and thought about it and I go, well, I can read and I can write, which are the two main things to become a lawyer. So I go, okay. So I went to my counselor in high school. I wanted to graduate early and get started on like becoming an attorney. And I'm very fortunate that that was suggested to me and that I went with it and that I liked it. And there's been times where, I've struggled being an attorney. It's very stressful. You start to like rethink, like, why did I do this to myself? But I was very lucky that, my dad had that insight. He suggested it and followed through. I graduated high school early. I went to undergrad, went to law school and became an attorney. And I can't really say I've regretted any of it. It's been an exceptional experience and it's really made me a stronger person in everything that I've dealt with.
And you talk a little bit about the stress of being an attorney, which I remember when I was going to undergrad, I was thinking either business, and I actually have an emphasis of law, which I'm not planning on pursuing, just because after a while I realized, like after doing more research, how kind of stressful that industry can be, especially because you're dealing with issues, and sometimes they're really complex issues which deal with human emotions. So can you talk a little bit more how you deal with stress?
One of the things that I did was, I have my own law practice. So that's like a whole set of other stresses, like having your own business. So the one benefit or upside of having your own law practice is you get to choose your cases. So I told myself, early on, I didn't want to do family law and I didn't want to do criminal law. Those are the two things that I didn't want to do. And I've stuck to that. Those are very, very stressful areas of law. I started in employment and I did employer defense, and then I went into landlord tenant and I represent a lot of landlords. But within that, I found there were so many different things you can do because I deal a lot with real estate. So I found kind of a niche that I really liked doing, which was tenant buyout. And it was a niche that ironically attorneys didn't want to deal with. But it was something that I felt like I had a good rapport with talking to people. I talk a lot with tenants. I felt like it was a good way that I could contribute positively. So even though I'm negotiating, I have a lot of humanity in what I'm doing and I do empathize a lot with tenants. And so I'm able to get good deals done because I can see both sides. So I was able to incorporate a lot of my negotiation skills and just things that I really like, which is kind of like mediation. It's sort of what I'm doing. I'm mediating between these two sides. So that's how I'm able to curb a lot of my stress was over time, I figured out the things that I really liked and cut out the things that I didn't. I did litigation for a really long time. I still do some litigation. That's when you deal with lawsuits, two people suing each other. And you can make good money, but it's also very expensive for clients and it's very stressful. So I've managed to figure out, like, you know what, I want to do less of that. Or I don't want to do this. I want to do this over here. I couldn't have done that or figured that out unless I exposed myself to things. So, I wouldn't know that I didn't like litigation unless I did it. I wouldn't know that I like tenant buyouts unless I started it. So a lot of what happens in law is you might start in one area of law and then change and go, hey, I don't want to do landlord tenant. Maybe you like environmental, or I don't want to do transactional. I want to do litigation, or I don't want to do business. I want to go do, some other thing, real estate. So there's a lot of flexibility, but any area of law that you go into, those skills transfer to any other area of law. So being in employer defense, I saw a lot of similarities and had dealt with a lot of different things that when I changed an area of law, I was able to translate those skills over.
And I want to talk a little bit about like books and resources. I know you mentioned that you enjoy reading and you enjoy writing. So, are there any books, resources, or mentors that have been profoundly influential in your personal development journey?
I would say I tell everybody, and I told everyone on Saturday, I tell my students, there's a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. I think that's a really good book if you're going to study or if you're going to have a business. It's really about time management and having set time where you don't break concentration, especially if you're a student. You need that kind of time. So that's a really good book. If you want to be an entrepreneur, a really good book would be The E-Myth. That's by Michael E. Gerber. That's a good book. I read specifically the one for, lawyers, but it was pretty much the same as the original. But that's a really good book for people that want to be entrepreneurs, for them to better understand how to scale a business. Another good book, if you want to go into real estate, would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kawasaki. I think that's how you say his name. That's also another really good staple book for real estate. So those are three of them. As far as other areas, I don't know too much about them, but those three, even if you read them, even if you don't want to go into real estate, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a really good way of understanding how to build wealth outside of just your career path, how to take your career, how to take your business money, and how to build wealth with it. And then the other thing, that's not really books, but whatever you want to do, I always encourage everybody to get yourself immersed in it. So do your research. With the internet, you can learn anything and, it's all readily available. So if you want to be a nurse, research people who have been nurses, look at YouTube, have people, I'm sure there's channels, how to study for those exams, tips and tricks if you're a nurse, different ways you can make money being a nurse. So that's always I think, really powerful thing that, we have now that I didn't even really have when I was a kid. And as far as kind of mentors, I've had mentors, which are actual, people that I've dealt with in my life that I worked for, or clients of mine, or people in the industry that I've met that I can go to. And I also would say a channel that I like a lot is Ali Abdal. His channel is a lot about productivity, and he started his channel, how to study for the medical exams, for testing and going to medical school in England, where he was a doctor. And then he had so much success on YouTube, he stopped being a doctor and focused on YouTube because that's really what he was passionate about. But he has a lot of great videos about productivity, about business, about studying. I mean, his channel covers a huge spectrum. And then just things himself, things, his ups and his downs and what he's learned. So I really think that that's a good channel that covers pretty much everybody in this program that they could benefit from.
And you spoke about that time management and right now the productivity and also just the concentration part of it, which I'm still an undergrad. I'm in my final year of undergrad, and I don't think it hit me until my first year in college how
Mhm.
important not just sitting there and reading text is, but like actually concentrating and understanding it. So I'd want to ask you what's like, and I know your day must change by the day, especially since you deal with multiple clients, but what is one consistent method that you try to apply when you're reading through a bunch of paperwork or just trying to understand what's going on that just lets you kind of zone into that for a while?
There was something, I think it might even have been in deep work that I got this, but I tried to check emails in the morning and afternoon. Sometimes I see them throughout the day, but for the most part, I try to, okay, in the morning, I'm going to check them, in the afternoon, I'm going to check them. That way, I'm not constantly on the phone distracting myself from what I have to do. I also try to set aside like specific, my calendar, like I've tried to do this and even I struggle with it. It's okay, today at this time, I'm going to do this thing. And it ends up being people are calling me, people are, texting me like, I need this done. So I did, not that, students can get this, but I did, have like a receptionist. So it's like a calling service and they take the calls. And I got like a separate phone line for my cell phone. So that way people couldn't be calling me all day long, blowing up my phone. So kind of the alternative for students on that is just putting your phone on do not disturb mode. And if you got to do that for 6 hours, if you're like, do it. And, if you might come back to 50 text messages, but just not hearing your phone beep. One, you're less inclined to pick it up and then get distracted with it, but also it helps you focus on what you're doing. Because I would always have people calling and I didn't want to miss the business, but I couldn't take it because I'm in the middle of writing something and I don't want to lose focus. So that was another very helpful thing. And then straight up just having a planner. Like I have a planner. I haven't started it this week yet, but like I use this thing every day. And every day I write down what I have to do. If something comes up and I got to do it that day, like I reach a deal, I got to draft it that day, I write it down. But having the planner and making sure I get to stuff every day is like great. Then I can look at my week and go, okay, what did I not finish? What did I not check off? And move it to the next week and kind of carry it.
Okay, perfect. This is actually, I know this is going, I know this is purpose for the students and everyone else, but this is actually really helpful in my situation too. Because I deal with the same issue of like I tried to block out my calendar as well. And like an hour of, I need to do this, but it just doesn't end up happening. Like something else completely
I can't
unrelated.
do time block. I've tried to do time blocking and I can't. And so I know like I've let things lapse. Like my newsletter used to be weekly, but now that my newsletter has been so successful, I have a lot of business. Now I can't do my newsletter. And then I did a lot of reaction videos, which I love doing, but I have to like sit down and do it. And then I just keep thinking, okay, I'll get to it to the weekend. And then my weekend gets full of stuff. I'm like, oh my God. Like, it falls apart. One of the things that's helped me is I get like a plain index card and I will write down everything that I got to do. And then I'll number them in order, like 1, 2. And then that's how I prioritize them. Like, okay, this has to get done. And then the other thing is just like the 2-minute rule or the 5-minute rule, like just the thing that you really don't want to do. Just sit down and start it for 2 minutes. And then you'll realize you'll probably just follow through with it. Like if I just sat down and told myself, okay, 2 minutes, do the newsletter, I probably would just finish the newsletter right there. I gotta like do the 2-minute rule more, but that I can't do the time blocking. I've tried, and then whatever I did it last week, I go, okay, I'm gonna time block it, and then like I moved them all, and like it just never worked. I was like, I can't do the time blocking. Some things don't work for everybody, and that's okay.
Very true. And actually, you mentioned a bit about like that newsletter, which I checked on your website and I had seen it. So I realized you have this element of, the attorney and working and the legal side of it, but you also explore just personal opinions and that kind of creative element of what it comes with being an attorney or working in the legal industry. So when did that kind of expressive side come? Was it right away you always had kind of this passion about just talking about the industry, or when did that kind of pick up?
It was kind of two things. It was sort of out of necessity because it does help get business. But then it was just talking to people and they're like, oh man, like you actually know a lot about what you're talking about. Or like, oh wow, you should say that to people. And so I just did the newsletter because one, I thought it was a good way to like be a little creative and break, the mundane of what I do. What I do is very like kind of template and routine. You negotiate, you draft it, you do this, and it's kind of like over and over again. And it was also a good way because people call me and it's like I have to explain the same thing to everyone because some people just don't know, or like they've heard about it, but they don't know what it's about. So newsletter was a good way to write out all the things that I already knew. And I could almost build like an FAQ out of it, or people would see it and refer it. Oh, hey, this newsletter totally applies to a client I have. And they would just send it off. So it was really kind of more a business thing, more relieving me of having to say the same thing over and over again. That's also what I do YouTube for. It's like I did a video on this. You could just watch the video. And still people want like to hear it all over again. But it's definitely been one of those things where I do have opinions. And the newsletters that I get the most feedback or the most replies on or ones where I talk about like, hey, I really had a tough time this week, or here's some of the things that are helping me with productivity, or here's some books and some quotes. Those ones like people love. Like oh my God, thank you for this. Can you do more book recommendations? Like I love it. So it's been really just a way of like kind of building a community also.
Yeah, and actually, I want to ask a little bit about personal values and principles that you have or that you've developed along your journey that kind of help guide your decisions or actions. And how did you come to define those values in your life, and how have they influenced your growth?
Well, one of the values that I have that's kind of directly related to sort of what I do is that like I do believe in business. And I do think that, being in America, I was very fortunate that I was born here. And, kind of the principles of America is being able to, enterprise, to have a business. And in California specifically, it's a really hard place to have a business. There's a lot of regulations. So when I had my own, I, there's plaintiff side and there's defense side. And you can see both sides of them. There's definitely, people that have been victims, and there's definitely businesses that are being taken advantage of or, being abused with lawsuits. So I really tried to make sure that when I took on cases that I was heavily vetting who I was taking on. Because there was times where I took cases where I felt like, my client like wasn't being fully honest about the situation, or left out a lot of information that obviously I don't find out until I'm in a lawsuit. So I try to, in that sense, be mindful of like when you file like a lawsuit, that's a big deal. It's a very hefty thing. And there's going to be someone on the plaintiff side, someone on the defense side. I'm predominantly on the defense side, but from time to time I'm on the plaintiff side because I do feel like, yeah, these people, despite all these laws being in place, they were violated in this instance. So just having this idea or this understanding of, how hard it is to have a business, I'm very mindful of cases that I take on. And there's a lot of cases that I don't take on because I sort of have a good feel for reading people. And I can tell, like you're not being wholly honest, or you're not being truthful about the situation, you're leaving out things. And I've had people who didn't want to hire me as an attorney because I asked them too many questions. So, like I just grilled them too much. And I go, see, like they didn't pass this. I'm like happy I didn't take this case. So just understanding business and being educated about it Doesn't necessarily mean that, businesses should do whatever they want and get away with things, but I think it definitely helps people better understand their role in a company. And, understanding there's a bigger picture to things and how business works, and that really a lot of people could have their own business. And I feel a lot of people that, that are really young, they want to have their own business, but they kind of don't know what that really entails. Like, it sounds great, but there's a lot of regulation. You have to have insurance. You got to do payroll. You have to be mindful of the regulations for your industry, things like that. So reading, business books, even if you don't plan to have a business, I just think understanding how that works and just being aware of that, you can put yourself in other people's shoes, vice versa. So that's been one principle that I have kind of doubled down on and has guided me and why I do certain things in my practice. And then just another principle is being fair. I do try to be reasonable. You do have fiduciary duties to a client, but I also am not particularly trying to ruin lives out there. So that is also another thing. A lot of what I do is tenant buyouts, and a lot of it I do try to be fair. And sometimes, I have to push my client a little bit more, hey, you should offer a little bit more, because I think that's going to be fair. It's going to help, the tenant drastically and make a huge difference for them. So I think those are the two, biggest principles that I have is fairness and just being mindful of the bigger picture, being very careful of the kind of cases that I take.
And actually, you spoke about it a little bit in the first part, which was the element of business and essentially money. I remember at this event on Saturday, I heard you actually mentioning it to the students about how you reach a certain point or a certain age where a lot of your life has to do with money, and there's no way of kind of getting around it. You need money. So I remember you mentioning that, and I just kind of wanted to ask if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, or tell whoever's watching this video about when did you start realizing the importance of, especially as you ran your business, just understanding how the world functions, the business functions, and the element of money?
So money is a funny thing. You have to have money. You can't unless you lived off the grid or, did something of that sort. From high school, out of high school on, everything's gonna be about money. You're gonna have to pay your tuition, you're gonna have to pay rent, you have to pay for a car, you have to pay for food, you have to pay for entertainment, you have to pay for clothes. When you get a job, you're going to get paid, and you're working in an enterprise. So the idea is the business has to be profitable. Otherwise, no one's going to have a job. And I think that's kind of a thing sometimes people don't understand. Well, my boss makes so much money. Well, your boss is taking on a lot of risk. And I think that, again, people should understand that. And it's not to say that, again, you should be abused as an employee, but you have to understand if the business doesn't make money, then there's no incentive to have the business, right? So that's kind of a thing that it's harsh, but it's true. That's how the first world works. That's how every country basically works. Anywhere you go, if the business doesn't make money, it's not going to pencil out and it's not going to continue. So when you have a choice when you go to college and what you want to do, you should always look up, well, what is the trajectory of that career? Do you make them? And a lot of people, when I talk to them, wanted to be in real estate, wanted to be nurses, wanted to go to medical. I imagine they all wanted to do that because there was going to be money involved. So you're not going to college for anything other than either you have a very strong passion for something, which is usually, politically involved or environmentally involved or public service involved, or you want to make money for your time and skill set. And so you'll always, when you start a job, you'll make money and then you'll continue to grow. And at some point, you'll probably have a kind of a ceiling. I can only make so much money for my time, for what I do. Then you might want to go have your own business. So when you're younger and you get educated on business, you could probably figure out, maybe I don't want to have a business ever. Maybe I'm just okay getting a job and just growing and climbing either in one company or in different companies. And there's psychology and studies about, getting jobs and getting raises and how you can earn money. And then you take that money, maybe you invest it in something passive, maybe you invest it in stocks. Real estate's kind of not passive anymore, but real estate. So maybe you don't want to have your own business, but you want to maximize your money. You want to learn about, IRAs. You want to learn about 401ks if they're offered at your job. So I think people have a little stigma about money, like you don't want to be controlled or defined by money, but money is a tool. And money has no value until you use it to buy something, right? Like you can't eat money, right? You can't do anything with it, but you could buy something with it, and that's where you get the value. My food, my house, my car, my trip to Disneyland. So everyone should really get informed about money, and there's just so many YouTube channels out there. There's so many books out there. And again, take these things not with a grain of salt, but be mindful that everyone's situation is different. But you could watch a channel like Graham Stephan. He talks a lot about, what are good credit cards to get and why they're good. Talks about real estate, talks about stocks. So just getting yourself educated and informed and looking it up. Maybe you start with a little bit of money. Maybe you have $500 and you go, okay, I'm going to play with $500 in the stock market and I'm going to invest in the S&P 500, right? The rest of your life will be about money, and you want to set yourself up for retirement. You want to set yourself up to enjoy your life, right? Like you don't want to necessarily be, working 24/7, then you have money, but you're never enjoying it. You're not living. So I think everyone should get more and more educated about money. And there's so many channels dedicated to it. There's so many books about it that there's really no reason that anybody, if you don't like reading for whatever reason, you can watch YouTube videos about it. But if you're not curious and you don't start that process, you're never going to know, and you're going to feel like you're at a disadvantage. But everybody who more or less has money, who didn't come from money, they learned and they got themselves educated and they were curious and they read books about it.
Definitely. And again, I want to say a quick sorry to everyone who's watching these, because I know I typically ask a bunch of questions regarding youth champions to people that I speak with, but I feel like we've just been having a really interesting conversation, so I've kind of pushed these off to the end. But as we're approaching near the end of the interview or the conversation, I do want to ask a little bit about youth champions and kind of your involvement. So again, you're one of the facilitators for the program. Youth Champions itself, I was a part of it. I'm an alumni of the org. It's not your standard program where it's typically all the kids in there just want to go to a 4-year college and we're going to help you get to a 4-year college. Really, we have kids who literally have told us, I want to go straight into the military. I want to go to trade school. And then we also do have those that end up going to the Stanfords, the UCLAs, etc. But just the central mission of Youth Champions is not focused on just directly targeting those kids. So as a facilitator, can you tell us a little bit about curriculum and kind of the implementation when you're dealing with a pretty diverse set of students?
Well, when you have kind of the curriculum that we have, what's great about it is it applies to anybody, whether you go to the military, whether you go learn a trade, whether you go help your parents work, you go to college. All of it is really geared towards self-confidence and the different aspects of that. So self-confidence comes from when you're organized. Self-confidence comes from when you're educated. Self-confidence comes from experience, which gives you wisdom. So all of these things you learn about. Self-confidence also comes from being willing to be exposed to new experiences and get out there. It comes from self-talk. So all of these things transcend, like I have my own business and I'm an attorney. So I went on that track. I went to college, I went to law school, I worked at a firm, and then I went out on my own. So I followed kind of the track that people, know or understand as being, quote unquote, entrepreneur. And that's like a whole other thing. If you were to go to the military, you would still need all of these things, and probably even more so because the military is there to actually reinforce all of these things. If you were to go learn a trade, you don't have to have a college degree to become wealthy. There's plenty of people who become millionaires who are electricians, who are plumbers, but they become wealthy because they've learned these skill sets, right? They've had confidence in themselves and they've mostly been curious. A lot of clients that I have that are in real estate, they never went to college, but they were curious. Someone had told them about, you should buy real estate. Then they went into the bank and asked the bank, how does a loan work? What do you look for in a loan application? What does a loan application look like? They learned about a real estate schedule. They learned about a personal financial statement. They went to the SBA. You could buy a building with SBA money. And they have, different loan programs that you could put less money down. But you wouldn't know that unless you went and researched that. You would have no idea. So The program itself, I think, is geared towards encouraging students really to believe in themselves and to have kind of the tools necessary to have that sort of confidence going into the world that maybe you don't know what you want to do, but that's okay. At least you have these skill sets that you believe in yourself, you have confidence in yourself. So whatever direction you go into, you'll go into it head on, like the most prepared to get the most out of that experience.
And again, we're at the end point of the conversation. So I'd wanna ask you, Sasha, just any kind of closing remarks that come to your head that you'd want to tell some high schooler. Maybe they're not even a part of the org yet, or they're just looking into youth champions and they're coming across our YouTube. Anything that you'd want to get across to that high school student or that young adult who's barely kicking everything off.
Everything is sort of temporary. High school's temporary, college would be temporary, your first job might be temporary. So if you're in a tough spot, and I've been in those situations and I had it tough, that won't always be the rest of your life. And all of the things that were tough for me actually made me stronger and encouraged me to have more faith in myself when sometimes I didn't, but I overcame a lot of stuff. So for everybody in high school, whatever it is that you want to do, or maybe you don't want to do, there is absolutely nothing stopping you from doing it. And you're in one of the best times to not only succeed in whatever industry you want to succeed in, but to be successful yourself. There's more self-help out there for people than ever. You can go on the internet and learn about anything you want to do. So if you're in high school and you are interested in anything, research it and like fully delve into it, and always be open to learning new things and taking on new opportunities, because that's how I am where I am today. Is I created opportunities for myself because I was curious and I was open to learning new things.
This was a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot. So I really appreciate your time, Sasha. For everyone who's watching the video, again, please stay tuned. Save these down if you want to come back later for current champions. I hope you guys got to know Sasha a bit more. And for our alumni, this is a quick peek at the new kind of facilitator and new energy that Youth Champions is bringing forth. But again, Sasha, thank you. I really appreciate it. And for everyone who's watching, thank you.